Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Kristine. Kristine, welcome to the show. Thank you for making time today to be with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and to share my journey.
Yeah, fantastic. So could you introduce yourself to the listeners, please, Kristine?
Absolutely. My name is Kristine Moser. I am coming to you from Minnesota in the US, and I am an adopted person, an adoptee. I don't know, depending on how you want to say it. My adoption story goes back many years, and I have been in reunion with my birth mother and her family, and kind of the journey that goes along with that over 37 years. And I'm also a part of a board here, a nonprofit organization that supports adoption and does advocacy work. It's called Bellis, and really supporting education, peer support, and advocacy work for adoption.
Yeah. So the Minnesota, I know it's cold in the winter.
It is.
I know. Do I know you've got? Is the football team called the Vikings? Is that right?
The Vikings, yes.
So the Vikings.
Yes.
And more than that, no, I've never been to Minnesota. I've been to Indiana briefly.
Okay.
I've been to Tennessee. I've been to New York. I've been to Seattle, but I've never been to Minnesota. It's big farming country, is it? Minnesota, lots of.
There's a good amount of farming and kind of mining that happens in the north side. I would recommend, if you want to come, if you're not into winter and winter sports, come during the summer, and it's the land of 10,000 lakes.
Wow.
Beautiful summer weather. It's hot, it's humid. You want to be on a lake if you can.
Okay.
Highly recommend that, and maybe pass on the winter time.
Yeah. Okay.
Gets cold.
Good call. Gets cold. So for anybody listening, there will be links to Kristine's social and the Ellis website in the bottom of the show notes, right? So you're before we started recording, you talked about some very tricky stuff that's going through that are particular, like that's happening right at the moment between a birth family and an adoptive parents and the kids, where you were really concerned about the kids being stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
So we're just going to explore that. We're just going to explore listeners
absolutely.
the way to look at this stuff.
So one of the programs that Bellis has launched recently, so in April, we started this program after doing some research with Wilder, which is a local research organization, to see, basically, we found that throughout the world, there's actually a support group in the UK, but that was the only one we could find that really supports birth parents whose parental rights are terminated. And so once that decision is made by a court, all support that they maybe had prior to that from the birth family, it could be a birth mother or birth father, that goes away. And there's a lot of trauma that happens in that space. And so Bellis decided to kind of deep dive into that space. And we started a support group, a peer support group that's facilitated by some social workers locally, really diverse population of women who have a similar experience. And over the last few months, we've seen this group of women really come together in a really beautiful way. And a local news channel has recently done a spot on the program. It's called Stronger Together, and just kind of showcasing our ability to come together and how peer support really helps us be better, learn from each other. And there's been some backlash that has happened because of one of the women who shared her story on that spot with the news from her adoptive parents of her kids. And so we were having a board meeting last night, and it kind of bubbled up to me. And I had this feeling of just my immediate thought when I found out the context of where the grief and where the backlash was coming from. I thought maybe it was social media, and they're like, no, it was coming from the adoptive parents. And my heart just sank, thinking about the kids. And I don't know this woman. I'm not a part of the actual peer support meetings because I don't have that experience. We try and keep it very protective and trustworthy with the women who are impacted by it. But it made me think of those kids, and how adoption in general already places an adoptee in the middle. They are that bridge, if you will, between the adoptive parents and their biological family or their first family. Lots of different ways to describe it. And being an adoptee, I could easily put myself in those kids' shoes of how do I navigate this? What do I feel versus what does my adoptive mom feel? Am I proud of her? Do I have feelings based on the fact that she isn't able to be a part of my life right now? And I don't really have a say in that. Do I feel grateful for my adoptive family? What sort of information about her journey as a human are they giving her? I don't know. I just had a really hard time. And I think as an adoptee, and I don't know if you have thoughts about this either, but that being in the middle and playing that middleman, if you will, or middle woman in my case, and how difficult it is to navigate those feelings, those emotions that are all real and they're all valid. Protection, likely, right? I can project that the adoptive parents are trying to protect their kids. And I would also say that the birth mom is trying to protect her kids too, and still maintain relationship with her. She's still a mom, even though she's deemed unfit, if you will.
These are really, really highly emotionally charged waters that we're swimming in. Yeah. And so for the birth parents or adoptees that are listening to this, like, it is, you are not going nuts.
Yeah.
You are not going nuts. It's okay. You're having normal reactions. What do they say? Normal reactions to an abnormal set of circumstances.
Situation. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, my thoughts on that. I mean,
I know you're an adoptee, so I think sometimes when adoptees get in the same room, virtually or not, it's important to be able to share that, because my experience looks different than yours, and maybe these kids that are having this experience currently. Yeah.
So I think I'm gonna jump in with a massive disclaimer. Okay, there's every one of these, and it's a truism. People say every adoption is different, every person is different, right? So we are not. If you're listening, adoptive parents, to this, and you're thinking, Simon and Kristine are going to help me know what to do, right? Oh. We're not gonna we're gonna give you our opinions on it. We're going to share your experience, but we're not going to tell you what to do, because we don't know.
No,
we don't know. It's dangerous. Let's tread carefully. Let's be extra sensitive, right? Let's be extra sensitive, and let's see if we can get through as best we can. We're going to get through this as best as we can. We're going to get through this. The calmer that we can stay as we're in these dangerous waters, the less we lash out, the better it's gonna be. But it is gonna be tricky. This whole stuff
Mm-hmm.
is tricky. So I will share what restarted my search for my birth mother. I will share the story of that in from the sake of transparency and vulnerability. So probably about 10 years ago, so when I was 44, I started the search, and I got the original birth certificate with the name, and I stopped, and I didn't go any further. And then a couple of years later, I was in a therapist chair, and the thought of my birth mother, the therapist said something about my birth mother. Sorry, she said something to the therapist, and the idea of my birth mother being outside the door of the therapist's room, and and me opening the door and her rejecting me again, flooded into the whole of my body. And my first reaction, I think, is really visceral. I got flooded. I got flooded with fear of her rejecting me again, right? As I saw it at that time, of her not loving me enough. I got that thing flooded into my, and then right on the heels of that terror was anger, and anger towards her again. And I'd only ever felt that anger once before in 46 years of my life, right? And then the next, on the heels of the anger, came a flood of defiance. I am not going to let this fear of her potentially rejecting me again stop me searching, or
determination.
Not stopping me searching. No, I am not going to. I'm going to run. I don't. Have you heard this phrase? Apparently, the Marines, so the Marine in the for people listening in the UK, the Marines are the elite American army fighting force, right? So
the toughest of the tough, if you will.
Yeah, the toughest, like our, well, we have Marines in the UK as well. So, but it's a bigger thing in the States, the Marines. So they say we run towards the gunfire. Everybody else runs away from them, but the Marines are the tough, because they're, as you say, the toughest, the toughest, they run towards. So what came to me was, I am not going to let this fear destroy my life or impair my life. I'm being probably, when I say destroy, I'm probably being a bit melodramatic, but and this all flashed straight through me. I am not gonna let this stuff. I'm not going to let this fear have the better of me. And the only way over is through. The only way over this emotion is run straight into it like a Marine would run towards the battle. And that's when I took up my search. And then 9 months later, I got the adoption file, and I realized that this notion that I'd had of my birth mother rejecting me was completely and not loving me enough, was complete and utter baloney. I was going to use another word, but it's a family show. So
it was a story you made up in your head, as Brene Brown says.
Yeah,
one of my favorites.
The story in my head was pure fiction. I thought I was watching CNN or Panorama in the UK. I was watching the Comedy Channel. It was made up. It was false. It wasn't a documentary. It was a work worth of complete and utter fiction.
Mm.
So the reason I'm sharing my side of this, and we'll get into yours in a minute, Kristine, is for me, I'm trying to bring home the visceral experiences, the visceral feelings that your kid is going through, maybe going through in this stuff.
In this situation, yeah.
Yeah, and I found my way through that but you ain't gonna. But I find my way through that with my own stuff, my own self-awareness.
Right. As an older person too, right? I think about, you were moving through those feelings in your 40s. And my understanding of this situation is these are younger kids.
Yeah.
And they're may or may not be seeking professional help. I don't know that your awareness at that point in your life is to be open to that or to understand those emotions either. So they're just happening to you. And so that's the piece that where my mama bear heart as a mom of 2 kids, and an auntie to others, like, whew, I felt it for them. And I think in my situation too, I've had great support my whole life of saying, this was a situation of your adoption, and your birth mother loved you and she wanted to provide the best life for you. My birth mother was 16 when she had me and had lots of options through her parents, her siblings, to provide the life with her. And she chose adoption. And I've never had that visceral anger that you'd speak of. I've always felt very grounded in love. And I have lots of theories around why that happened. But at the same time, I'm now building a relationship over the last 15 years with my birth family. So I have siblings that are half siblings of mine, and I have my birth mom and her whole side of the family who has, quote unquote, counted me in their family for many, many years. They're a large family. She's the youngest of 9. And so I have like 30 plus cousins. I can't even keep track of them. And it's been a really positive thing for me to connect with that. But on the flip side, it's been really difficult for me to navigate that with my parents and their idea of what my relationship with Amy should be with my birth mom. So that navigation, no matter how grounded I thought my relationship with my parents is, it's been shaken by those emotions. And in Bellis, when we go into high school and middle school classrooms and just talk about adoption. And one of the things that I always say is, like, families come together in lots of different ways. And when a woman makes a plan for an adoption, or the other choices that she has, a choice to parent or a choice to, move through her life without and terminate that pregnancy, all of those choices come with a lot of different emotions. And on the flip side, a parent who chooses to adopt or parent in a different way, they have a lot of emotions. It's like a life thing. It's not just an adoptive thing. There's emotions. And if we don't address those emotions, if we don't make sure we're thinking about the impact that those relationships and those words have, I think it can be difficult to navigate, and you may not navigate it until you're older, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, I had those, that was, I want to kind of underline these, those emotions, that animosity towards my birth mother was, I'm 54, right? I've had two bursts of 20 seconds of that animosity in my life.
Mm-hmm.
2 bursts of 20 seconds. So that's why I can look at it and I can, they are very clear. It's like Everest is suddenly put on the Utah salt flats or something, you know, like it was,
Right.
they were really big instant peaks, and then they went straight away. I and I found my kind of like, I found the way through them. But how you're going to find help, if you're an adopted parent listening to this, how you're going to find your way through is you're going to find your way through. You're going to find your way through the navigation as best you can.
Yeah. And there's no right way, right?
There's no right way. There's no right
but
way.
I think the point I'm trying to come across, and maybe this is just my little soapbox that I'm on, but making sure that the feelings and emotions of the person in the middle of all this are being heard, that they have a safe space, that as an adoptive parent, you can provide that space. It doesn't mean that you don't have emotions. It doesn't mean that your emotions aren't valid. Those are true things. And they can be different. Like I'm obsessed, maybe obsessed isn't the right word, obsessed with paradox right now, right? Both polar opposite things can both be true. It's a both and in some of these situations of like, yeah, it's true that my parents are having feelings about my relationship with my birth family, but I have emotions too, and they can both be true at the same time, even if they're opposing.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to just explore in that and to be open to. And you know, one of the philosophies that I think has helped me work through my own processes and help friends who've had relatives pass, or things, you know, I've had friends whose parents have passed really young, or sisters and siblings have passed, is to feel all the feelings, regardless of what it is in those moments. Allow yourself, allow your body, allow your mind to feel it and let it pass through you. Because when you said it was 20 seconds of visceral, if you would have let that stay or have additional 20 seconds, and there wasn't a free space to allow it to open and pass through you, get that energy out, I don't know, what would that impact have been? And how do you navigate that?
So the first time this stuff happened to me, I want to talk about, you know, you talk about paradoxes, right? What I see, you know, we talked about this, I talked about the story in my head, and I talked about me seeing through it, right? So only I can see through it. Only we can see through the baloney in our own heads.
Yep.
And when we see through it, we see the piece of who we are underneath it. So I had this fantastic, I recommended this guy to you, didn't I? This Rupert Spira guy. He talks about, like, so if you imagine all our feelings and all our thoughts like a movie on a screen, who we are is the screen. So when we see through when we see through our thoughts, when we see through our trauma to the essence of who we are, the essence of who we are is that blank screen. But only we can see through that. We're fixated as human beings. We're obsessed with our own thoughts and our own feelings, and we listen to our voice in the head and we think it's us, and it isn't. I heard a guy express this really well. He said, somebody said, well, what about you? And I thought about, what, the voice in my head, who am I? The voice in my head. And I went and I asked for a meeting with the guy that had the voice in my head. And I turned up and there was nobody there. It's a metaphor for the ego.
Mm-hmm.
We see through our thoughts and our feelings. We see the truth of who we are. We see through them. They become transparent, and that leads us to the truth of who we are, which is that screen. And that screen is obscured by the movie. And the movie is a work of fiction. It's like that comedy channel. And another way of saying that is that, as the French guy says, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. The spiritual being that we are is the screen, and the human experience is the movie. It's life. We talked about Minnesota Vikings. Life is a contact sport. The human experience is full of knockbacks, bounce backs, trauma, recovery. It's really loud.
Absolutely.
It's really noisy. The voice in our head is really noisy, and it pulls our attention. The movie has our attention, and we're lost in the movie rather than the spiritual being of who we are, the piece of who we are, which is the screen.
Yeah, it paints I think a really beautiful picture of that dichotomy too. I have this vision in my head, and I tend to be a very positive, half glass full sort of person. It's just who I am. It's how I've always been. But I have this vision of a big table. When I think about all the people that I love and that are connected to me, and this is a giant table, and everybody's together, intermingling with each other and connecting with each other because their common thread is me and my family and my kids. And there's this interconnected component, and it's lively and it's fun and it's loving, and there's a beautiful meal and we all share it together. That's how I think adoption should be. Everybody has a seat at the table, and it's open and it's wide, and it doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries that you're comfortable with, because I think that's something that our culture struggles with. I know American culture struggles with boundaries, and what does that mean, and why am I putting that boundary in place? What is my true intent behind that boundary? But I hope that there can be empathy and compassion in order for people to all be at that table who are impacted.
Yeah. And we're at the table to enjoy the meal, not to argue about table manners.
Yeah. Or about how we got to the table.
Well,
or why we're at the table.
Why we're at the table.
We're just at the table, and that's okay. I mean, I think about even just, we're coming up to holiday season, and there's ideas that people have about who gets to be at their table. And I guess it's just me. I'm wide open. I want everybody at my table. I remember holidays when I didn't live near my family, and I would go with coworkers and friends to their family gatherings. And I think that helped me understand how open some families are to having a complete stranger to them and come and have a family meal with them, because I was important to another person who was a part of that family. I think there's some beauty in that, and that openness, and that ability to be vulnerable to whatever comes to that table.
So what if the world was one big table and there's 7 billion people on it? 7 billion people at it. you know, I mentioned this Rupert Spira guy, and we're talking about, you know, the self. There is, you know, the seeing through the self, seeing, you know, the metaphor that I gave as ego, and the fact that kids aren't born thinking of themselves, aren't they? They're not. They don't see themselves as separate from others. I mean, can you
very interconnected, right?
Sorry, they're interconnected. So
yeah,
we crave connection.
yeah.
We're born connected, then we become disconnected, and we crave connection. I mean, that's why people go to see the Minnesota Vikings.
Mm-hmm. To have something to be connected to
feel
create community. Yeah.
You know, I've been to some. I've never been to an American football game, but I've been to some rugby games, and well, when England plays Scotland, not England plays Scotland, but when England plays Scotland, there's so much bad blood that it's not a great.
It's not fun. No,
not fun. So, but if England, so Scotland are playing, my wife's Scottish, so Scotland are playing Ireland, or Scotland playing Wales or France or Italy. Those are the matches that I've been to, right? And they play each nation plays its national anthem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm English, right? But I'm crying at the Scottish national anthem, and I'm crying at the other anthem, and I'm feeling connected to the 60,000 people in the stadium, and I'm not Scottish or Welsh or Irish or
and both are true. There's the dichotomy, right?
But we
You're crying at both. That's a reality. But you wanted to be connected, and you feel that connection to all those people around you. There's energy in that.
And what your child is craving is what we're all craving, and it's connection. And people say this stuff, love isn't enough. Well, it's a pretty good place to start. You know, I heard a mentor of mine talking about his kid having a meltdown. Not, you know, this is a bio kid, natural kid, you know, not an adopted kid. And she was 6. And she was taking chunks out of the wall and trying to take chunks out of him. And he just stayed with her. He just held her. And did he, at one stage, I think he sat outside the room, or I can't remember. He sat outside the room.
Truly holding space.
He held the space. He did. He's like something scaring the bejesus out of him. A 6-year-old tantrum, tornado. Tantrum's probably too gentle a word for it.
Yeah.
But he just held the space. Nothing was. And this is stupid, right? I'm thinking of my dog pulling, and me trying to pull my dog back. You know, my pulling on the lead, and like that resist. You know, what we resist persistently. You know, it's just like going, being there, going there. I mean, what can you do? What can you do other than be there? You don't. What do people do at what do people do at funerals? They just kind of hug each other.
They're just there.
They say, I don't know what to say, and they just hold the space, and that's it. Or they.
Yeah. I think with, you know, as you kind of looping back to the program that Bellis has, that's the full concept, is a group of women who can support each other and hold space for each other. And I think that longing to connect is one of the key tenets to the work that Bellis is doing. And I think why I feel so strongly, like I could emote with each of the people in that situation. I can emote with the birth mom who's excited about the fact that she's working through this and is hopeful for reuniting and connection with her kids, connection. And I can feel and put myself into the shoes of the adoptive parents who are trying desperately to protect the children from maybe additional trauma or the unknowns, but they want that connection to not be broken with them. And I can feel that Venn diagram of the kids. Like I always say, like, who am I? I'm part, innately nature, part Amy and my birth family. And guess what? I'm very much a part of my adoptive family. Like I am a Venn diagram. And so where is that part, that intersection in the middle where it comes together? I don't know.
Well, we're lonely in the me, and we're much happier in the we.
Yeah.
I want to share something else in terms of popped into my head as we were discussing this, right? So I explained the first meltdown in the therapist room, right? The second one. The first one was probably 6 years before that. And the outburst was, my birth mother didn't love me enough to keep me. She gave me the teddy bear as a consolation prize. Right? So that was the story some people have heard me talking about, which was the kind of start of my journey. So 14 years ago, right? And it came out with a lot of swear words and profanity and a lot of anger behind it. It was the first, and it was probably a 5-second burst of anger rather than a 20-second burst, but very, very intense. And the mentor of mine, a guy called Michael Neal, who shares a story about his 6-year-old daughter, used a phrase in a podcast a couple of months ago that I heard called loving disruption. I had this outburst. I was with quite a conscious person, she works a lot with autistic kids. She's like a horse whisperer and does horse therapy and equine assisted therapy and stuff like that, and all different things, mainly that. And as I said, my birth mother, I didn't say I didn't do with her, but I didn't use the word birth mother. I said she didn't love me enough to keep me. She gave me this consolation prize. What sort of a consolation? Tell you about, but with different volume and different, a lot more anger behind it, fury. And she said, gently, I'm a mum, Simon, and I don't think it was like that. So she lovingly disrupted me. Now, I didn't react like somebody might react on Facebook. How dare you invalidate my feelings? And then
burst more.
The bubble burst. The volcano stopped erupting. The trauma bubble burst, and I saw
dissipated.
Sorry.
Dissipated.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. Dissipated, and it dissipated with that loving challenge. And what I see in the adoptee world, in in I see none of that. It just that the social media world does not lend itself to gentle disruption. Now, when you gently disrupt somebody else, boy, there's no timetable for it, but and until we, well, there's a place for it, and I don't think it's talked a lot enough about. Everybody's saying, validate, you've got to validate their feelings. Well, you've got to validate. Well, you don't want to validate a story that is pure fiction, because that's just going to make the fiction grow.
Yeah, I think, I have a 4.5-year-old, so we got lots of big emotions in our house. So as a parent, I'm trying to help her identify what those emotions are, right? Her mind and her body are developing at a rapid pace, and she doesn't always know why she had that outburst, right? Why are you crying? So enabling her with those skills, identify the emotion for me. Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling mad? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling neglected? Are you feeling lonely? Are you elated? Let's identify. I think it's first that, and then allow your body to feel it and move through it. And then maybe you discuss it afterwards. Where are you at now? What happened? Because what I notice in her is, like, she goes to a different place when she's in that mode. And I'm assuming, your mentor, whose 6-year-old daughter was having this moment, like, there's no reasoning. So I think those big emotions.
He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything to her in the heat of the.
Yeah, he just let it be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then afterwards, you have to be able to identify what that emotion was. You might not have the words for it, but it was big. I see that you were feeling something. What was that? And I think so often, if we don't have that skill, then it does come out in bursts. It does come out because it's got to go somewhere. And there's a theory that it can become stuck in your body, right? Like, there's lots of different ideas around then how that manifests. And but I think there's ways through it by having love and by working toward it. I think, your podcast is about thriving adoptees, and I think we can all get there. But we do have to identify and have those moments, even if they're 5 or 20 seconds, to feel the feel and to move through it. And how do you do that in a proper way? I mean, that's a big question.
Well, I've said it before today. I think we're obsessed with our feelings. And you said, I've come up with I've come up with a I think it's quite a nice soundbite. But you said we've got to identify the feelings and not identify with the feelings.
Yes. It's not about that's who you are. It's a feeling that you have, and you let it pass through. You let it be. You hold space for it. Yep, this is what I was feeling, and now I can move beyond it. Can go out.
So,
but it's not who I am.
Our feelings aren't who we are. Our thoughts, subconscious or conscious, aren't who we are either. I heard this fantastic. We're not the voice in the head. We're the one that hears it. That's That's the blank screen. You know, going back to the movie analogy, the cinema analogy. We're in screen one. We're watching Halloween. We're scared. For as long as we're in screen one, we're going to be scared. Coming out of screen one, we're going to be scared. But screen one is scary. Screen one in the multiplex, you know. But they're playing love story in screen two. So let's look there. And let's realize that we're the screen, not the movie on it. We're so I have this metaphor. Your daughter will love this. Feelings come from thoughts. Like juice comes from fruit. But we're the juicer. We're not the fruit, and we're not the juice.
Yeah, I think I resonate with that.
We're trying to get rid of the juice.
I know.
We're trying to change the fruit.
Yes.
We're focused on the feelings and our thoughts.
Yeah. And I think there's something to being, I mean, you can make juice. You can make juice out of all sorts of things. But if you're making it out of rotten things, right? Like you talked about the things that we put in.
Oh, we don't put them in.
But if we're not, I don't know, you talked about love, right? And like, love isn't enough to me. If you put a lot of love in, guess what? If you're going to appreciate it, it's going to be good juice.
It is.
Keep feeding it with love. Like there's no, and that's hard. That's not an easy thing to do. It's not easy to be vulnerable to that all the time.
So the juicer's running on automatic most of the time. We're not putting the fruit in. Sometimes we need to switch it to manual if we can. But we should never be blaming ourselves for the fruit. Don't blame ourselves for fruit, because we would never choose to put sad strawberries into the juicer.
Yeah. Hopefully.
We would never choose. We wouldn't choose. We're not choosing. Most of us human beings aren't choosing most of the time. The juice is on manual. It's full of gunk. It's full of like what the psychologists call conditioning. It's full of traumatized tomatoes. Tomatoes are fruit, right? It's full of sad strawberries. It's full of angry apples.
Quite the smoothie.
Not who we are. Sorry?
It's quite the smoothie.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, it was going to be Simon and the smoothie machine, but it became Jack Cherry and the juicer. So, I'm conscious of time here. What would you like to call this episode?
Oh, that's a good idea. I don't know. I feel like it's just a reflection of sorts on adoption. I don't know. I don't know. We went down some tangents.
What about a reflection on connection?
Yeah, I like that.
Or reflections on connection.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's the core. His connection is key. Love is key. Yeah.
Thank you, Kristine. And
yeah,
check out what
lovely.
It's been lovely, hasn't it? Check out what Bellis are doing, what Kristine and her colleagues are doing at Bellis on there in the show notes, listeners. And thanks for listening. Different, completely experimental, exploratory episode on one I've loved, because we had no idea where it was going, but we ended up somewhere pretty cool.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you.